Another day, another lawsuit. We have another copycat commission lawsuit on the board. This marks 20 lawsuits since all of this began. So this time we have it courtesy of Utah. So some home sellers, or a home seller out of Utah, has filed a lawsuit. This happened this past Friday. Now this particular lawsuit is very similar. It's a very similar to previous lawsuits that have already been filed by different home buyers and sellers in other states. This time it's coming out of Utah, so that's a little bit different because it's the first one from Utah. As mentioned, this is number 20 that the National Association of Realtors has been implicated in. So there are some nuances here that I want to share with you. Again, this is going to be a good video to kind of summarize a lot of what's going on and what is eventually going to continue happening. So let's get into it and look at what those nuances there are, because this is going to really help us understand this at another level. So just setting the premise, and this article is coming courtesy of housingwire.com. Commission lawsuits head to Utah. So here we go. Yet another copycat commission lawsuit has hit the court docket. On Friday, home seller plaintiff Dalton Jensen filed an antitrust lawsuit in the U.S. District in Utah, accusing real estate industry players of colluding to artificially inflate real estate agent commissions. That is not new at this point. We have the artificially inflating. So colluding is a big part, or colluding is something that they continued to allege. Antitrust is something that they continue to allege. Inflating real estate agent commissions is something that continues to be alleged. So that's not necessarily new. So again, Utah being on the board, that is new. And then of course, you've heard this in the past. The way that these lawsuits typically happen is you have a attorney requesting or finding somebody that has done a sale basically in real estate and are encouraging them to make these create these lawsuits, or attempt to create these lawsuits to essentially get to a class action status. So there's a lot more money implicated. And the reason I say that it's an educated guess. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but it's an educated guess where if the home sellers that are bringing these suits, or home buyers that are bringing these suits, if they had to be out $300, $500, $800 an hour for these lawsuits and weren't on a contingency agreement, and contingency agreement is we're going to take on this case and you don't have to pay us until there's actual money that we're going to take a commission. So, or we're going to take a large cut. The famous lawsuit that happened in Missouri last year that really kicked all of this off. Well, it didn't start last year. It was adjudicated last year. It was on trial last year. I believe the attorneys took home 40%, something like that, of the, or will be taking 40% of the judgment. So as you can see, there's a big ticket item there. But anyway, although this particular part, all it says is that there were 4 MLSs that the property was on named, but they were named in terms of it was included in the lawsuit, but they weren't actually named as plaintiffs. What was on the plaintiffs was a ton of other brokerages. So you have, despite being listed in the suit, the 4 MLSs are not listed as defendants. Making an appearance on the defendant list are NAR, so National Association of Realtors. Basically every single without exception lawsuit is implicating NAR. Anywhere, which is formerly known as Realogy, and its franchise Century 21. So Anywhere is a holding company. It has Century 21. It has Coldwell Banker. It has ERA Realty. Several others. I believe there's Sotheby's. Yeah, Sotheby's. So Anywhere, again, formerly known as Realogy, is the parent company of all of these major brokerage brands. So it included the Cat Daddy, and then it also the I guess the Cat son or daughter. I don't know. That's a bad example. But anyway, so we have HomeServices of America and its affiliates, Remax, Keller Williams, and 2 local franchises, Equity Real Estate, Realty Path, and Windermere. So how many is that? Let's see. Let's count this up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, No, because it's going to include franchises. Let's forget how many are implicated here. It should be noted that Keller Williams, Remax, and Anywhere have filed settlement agreements in the Sitzer, Burnett, Morrell, and Nosalik suits, with Remax and Anywhere receiving preliminary approval on their settlement. So, as a quick reminder, Remax and Anywhere settled. They were initially named in the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit. There's five entities that were named in it. NAR was one of them. You had Keller Williams, you had Remax, you had Anywhere, and then you had, I believe, who was the other one? It was HomeServices of America, which is Berkshire Hathaway. So those were the five that were implicated before actually being tried. Before the actual trial even happened, you had Remax settling for, I believe, $83 million, and then you had Anywhere settling for about $83 million, and then you had Remax settling for $50 million. And here recently, about 2 weeks ago, Keller Williams, after the fact, after the judgment was rendered of $1.7 billion in judgment, or the judgment being rendered, Keller Williams settled for, I believe, was $70 million. So at this point, the folks that are going through the appeal process, the entities that are going through the appeal process of the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit at the moment, are NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and Berkshire Hathaway, aka HomeServices of America. So that's a little bit of a history behind that. All right, here's what I find interesting. Bum, 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 bum. Here we go. If NAR's adversary commission rule was not in place, when the cost of buyer broker commissions would be paid by their clients, home buyers, then the cost of buyer broker commissions would be paid by their clients, the home buyers. So essentially what they're telling us is that if this participation rule, meaning when you put a property out to list, you're making a requirement that the buyer commission cannot be zero. And that is something that did happen. And at this point, it's not happening at this point. But that's something that did happen. As long as it was not zero, you would be good to go. Now, it didn't set, hey, it has to be 3%, but it did have that as a stipulation when you were going to put the property out to market. Buyer brokers would thus have to compete with one another by offering a lower commission rate. Well, there's different ways to compete for one, and one of those happens to be price, for sure. So I just want to make sure that I don't necessarily think that the competition and then lower price is going to be synonymous. I think it's a component of, but I don't think it's the only way to compete. Brokers get more than the 6%. They get 7%. They get 8%, depending on what they're offering as well. So that's something to be mindful of. Now, when I say 7%, 8%, of course, then they choose how much they will offer or is offered on the buyer agent side. And then, of course, the buyer agent can negotiate or do whatever they want with their particular client as well. But again, yeah, for sure, there is competition right now to begin with. But even if there wasn't competition, I don't necessarily think that lowering the commission rate is going to be the only way to compete. The adversary commission rule, here we go. The adversary commission rule thereby restricts price competition, which it does not, among buyer brokers, because the person who actually retains the buyer broker, the home buyer, does not negotiate or pay the commission for his or her broker. Again, this is really the big crux of it. This was a big thing that was litigated. But I mean, at this point, kind of where I stand by the previous comment that I made. Now, let's see if we can find it. Dun, 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 dun. Over here. Over the weekend, HomeServices obtained a copy of the latest lawsuit filed in Utah. Chris Kelly, an executive vice president of HomeServices of America, wrote in an email, "We are analyzing the specifics of the case, particularly the timeframes and the MLSs mentioned in the suit, to ascertain the relevance of HomeServices as a defendant in this matter, especially considering that we do not have any company-owned brokerage operating in the specific area." So this is something that I've noticed more as we've been covering this more and more as as we continue to cover all of these lawsuits that come up. Again, there's about 20 at the moment that implicate NAR or that have come up here. This strategy, I don't know if Home Services of America is either more vocal or they're more willing to comment on cases, but it just seems that every single article, whether we get it through Inman, whether we get it through Housing Wire, whether we get it through Yahoo, through all of the major publications, whatever the case may be, it just seems that Home Services of America is more consistently presenting their strategy or presenting a little bit more comment. So right, so whenever you get named in a lawsuit, you're typically asked for comment. It just seems that Home Services of America is the most public facing in what their what their thoughts are, what they're looking to do, and all that stuff. So that's one observation that I appreciate, especially with this type of content that we create. But two, something else that I've noticed with their particular strategy, which I'm going to guess that the other brokerages that get named in this are doing the same thing. I don't know it because they don't necessarily come out with it and say it, but I'm gonna this particular Home Services of America will first start off, hey, should we even be named here? Right? So it seems that every brokerage catches a stray at this point because, again, I believe the arrangement that happens is an attorney is looking for a willing participant that was actually that they were, I don't want to say injured. What's the word? That they were affected by their home sale or they were affected in real estate of some capacity. So the attorney is looking for somebody that they could actually start the court case with or the lawsuit with, so then they could seek that class action status. So they essentially need a willing person, a willing entity that was affected. And again, for them, it's a contingency play where once they win or don't win, which hopefully there's no winning, but once they win or no win, that's when the commission gets paid, or that's when their fees, the attorney fees, happen. But anyway, Home Services of America, I've noticed in just about the last 3 to 4 articles that we've covered in this particular manner, they first start off, hey, we shouldn't even be named here. This doesn't even affect us. We're not looking to catch strays. Now I am assuming that Keller Williams does the same thing, Coldwell Banker does the same thing, eXp Realty does the same thing. But I thought that was super interesting. One, again, that Home Services of America, so a bit more, I want to say transparent, or at least more vocal about responses for whoever their PR person is doing a good job, in my opinion. But then two, they're consistently in the trying to get out of the lawsuit before they even have to adjudicate on the claims or defend themselves on the claims. So I think that's a very wise strategy. Before you even argue, before you get into the argument, it's what's my role in this, right? So again, I'm assuming that that's standard. I have no way of knowing that, mostly because I haven't been sued in this way, but also because I haven't seen that from other brokerages in their responses as soon as these suits come out. But anyway, Utah, you're on the board. You are number 20. You're the 20th lawsuit that has filed in this commission-based lawsuit. So let me know what you think. Which state? Let's make a game out of this. Which state is going to be next? At this point, we have California on the board. We have Arizona on the board, Texas on the board. We have now Utah on the board. We have a lot of states on the board at this moment. So let's have a little bit of fun with it. What state is next to get one of these lawsuits out into the world? Let me know in the comment section, and I'll see you tomorrow.